Welcome back, advanced linguistics students and future teachers. We are jumping right into our definitive masterclass on Tema 46. Today, we're exploring the absolute bedrock of how we communicate, the linguistic sign, and the intricate architecture of semantic structure. If you're prepping for your teaching exams, or you just really want a deep academic understanding of classical semantics, this explainer is built exactly for you. We are going to unpack the theories that define how words carry meaning, pulling directly from the foundational texts. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The linguistic sign. 2. Semantic structure focusing on synonymy. 3. Semantic structure antonymy. 4. Homonymy and polysemy. 5. Lexical creativity. And finally, 6. Navigating false friends.
Section 1. The linguistic sign.
Okay, let's ground ourselves right away in Ferdinand de Saussure, the father of the structuralist approach. This quote perfectly captures Saussure's revolutionary hypothesis from his 1916 course in general linguistics. He viewed language entirely through the lens of structuralism, meaning it's a system where elements like sounds and words basically have zero validity on their own. They literally only matter because of the relations of equivalence and contrast between them. Think of the concept of double articulation, right? That's where a lower level of completely meaningless phonemes combine to create a higher grammatical level of meaningful words. Language constructs meaning by ascribing arbitrary meanings to these combinations, forming what he called a purely psychological union. To really grasp this psychological union, we've got to split the linguistic sign right down the middle into its two articulation sides. First up is the signifier. Think of this as the phonological expression, the literal sound image we produce when we speak. So, for example, the combination of the phonemes tu plus wort plus a long e forms the word tree. It is the physical or acoustic medium of the sign itself. Right across from that, and inextricably linked to it, is the signified. This is the conceptual side. It's the established meaning, or the mental picture shared by speakers of the language. When you hear that TRE sound, you instantly picture a plant that grows above a certain size and reproduces by seeds. Now, the absolutely critical thing to remember here is that the link between the signifier and the signified is completely 100% arbitrary. There is no natural inherent reason why that specific leafy plant is called a tree in English or an arble in Spanish. That relationship is maintained purely by tacit social agreement. Building on the sign, we absolutely have to contrast two fundamental concepts Saussure introduced, langue and parole. Langue is the social fact. It's the theoretical system of language shared by society as a whole. It's like the rulebook. Parole, on the other hand, is the individual, unique realization of that system by a specific speaker. To draw a parallel to modern linguistics, it's a lot like Noam Chomsky's distinction between competence and performance. The agreed-upon meaning of the linguistic sign belongs to the langue domain, while the personal, specific connotations a word might have for you, well, that belongs strictly to parole.
Section 2. Semantic structure. Synonymy.
Moving into how these lexical items actually interact with each other within semantic systems, we're now dealing with sense, which is the meaning of words defined purely through their relationships with other words. And the most crucial point to understand about synonymy is that we have to distinguish between different degrees of it. According to the linguist Stephen Ullman, true synonymy has to fulfill two incredibly strict conditions: interchangeability in all contexts and exact identity in both cognitive and emotive import. Therefore, we distinguish between complete synonymy, dealing with words sharing the exact same cognitive and emotive meaning, and total synonymy, which means words are strictly interchangeable everywhere. Because of linguistic economy, the fact that languages just cannot afford to waste space having more than one element transmit a single meaning, real total synonyms are exceptionally rare.
Enter linguist John Lyons. He takes a super practical view on this, arguing that synonymy is entirely context-dependent. He gives us this definitive four-part matrix of synonyms based on those exact conditions of completeness and totality. So you can have synonyms that are complete and total, complete but not total, incomplete but total, and finally, incomplete and not total. It's a brilliant way of mapping out just how messy real language actually is. But remember, cultural and social demands dictate everything in traditional semantics. Context is king. While the phrase female fox and the single lexical item vixen are perfectly synonymous and interchangeable in normal usage, you cannot just swap male cow for bull in standard daily language, even if cognitively they represent the exact same animal. It just sounds wrong to a native speaker. This really highlights that synonymy is heavily context-dependent. A student might learn that fly and go by plane are synonyms, but using them properly depends entirely on register and context.
Section 3. Semantic structure. Antonymy. So, building into oppositeness of meaning, antonymy is often wrongly assumed to be just a simple, single kind of opposition. It's not. It is vital to separate its different forms. First up, we have complementarity, where the assertion of one element explicitly denies the other. It's binary. If you are single, you're not married. Simple as that. Then we have converseness. This relationship requires a syntactic flip, a transformation that permutes the noun phrase. Think of verbs like buy and sell. If John bought the house from Mary, it intrinsically means Mary sold the house to John.
But what happens when oppositeness isn't a strict true or false binary? Classical antonyms like big and small are explicitly gradable, right? We can easily say our house is bigger than yours. However, linguist Edward Saussure pointed out a fascinating problem with implicitly graded antonyms. He questioned the deceptive nature of asking a really simple question like, how big is it? Think about it. Grading is often purely relative to our own internal, subjective baseline. The assumption when asking how big is that the element is big rather than small. Yet, a big bug is obviously physically much smaller than a small cat. The terms are totally relative to a given quantity norm applicable to a specific experience, not some objective universal measurement. Section 4. Homonymy and polysemy. Now let's tackle two types of lexical ambiguity that constantly confuse both native speakers and foreign language learners. Lexicographers use two main criteria to tell them apart: etymology and relatedness of meaning. Take port, meaning a harbor. That comes from the Latin portus. But port the wine? That comes from the Portuguese city Oporto. Because they evolved from completely distinct historical lexemes that just happened to merge over time, this is classical homonymy. On the other hand, a native speaker intuitively knows that the mouth of a river is just a metaphorical extension of the mouth as a body organ. Because they share a single lexeme with several related extended senses, we call this polysemy. For words to meet the strict classical description of homonymy, they actually have to jump through some specific grammatical hoops. The lexemes must be syntactically equivalent, and they must be morphosyntactically equivalent in inflection, which basically means they share the same morphological variations for things like case, number, or gender. Traditional semantics focuses heavily on the medium here. So, homophones share the same pronunciation, like sow with a needle and sow the seed. Homographs share the same graphic form, like lead the guide and lead the metal. Section 5. Lexical creativity. Shifting gears a bit to explore how a language's vocabulary actually expands and breeds. As applied linguists, we draw a hard line between two different areas here. The first is productivity. This is a language's built-in faculty to expand its lexicon by means of a given set group of rules of word formation. A brilliant literary example is Anthony Burgess's novel A Clockwork Orange, where characters use a highly productive, entirely invented lexicon based on specific rules. The second area is individual creativity. This is the speaker's personal freedom to innovate messages in daily spontaneous communication. This is precisely what we want our second language students to do, to realize they have options in how they form their messages, whether that's through formal grammatical reorganization or tossing in entirely new vocabulary. My absolute favorite, highly intellectual example of this individual freedom is the nonce formation. This is a completely ad hoc, temporary coinage created on the spot to satisfy an immediate terminological need. Imagine a scientist describing the disorienting feeling of weightlessness underwater. They might just declare, "I shall call this space inebriation." These are very often preceded by explicit little formulae announcing the coinage. While science gives us formal coinages like maglev for magnetic levitation, informal social contexts give us highly creative slang like knee-jerk or mind-blowing. Creativity ultimately depends enormously on the social context. Section 6. Navigating false friends. And now we address a highly practical challenge and honestly the ultimate semantic trap for foreign language learners: false friends. These are elements in the lexicon that bear a massive formal resemblance with a lexeme of another language, but they absolutely do not share the same meaning. Just look at these classic examples of English and Spanish false friends. Eventually means finalmente, not eventualmente. Library is biblioteca, not libreria. And to the eternal amusement of English teachers everywhere, constipated refers to a digestive issue, not being constipado or having a head cold. It perfectly highlights the danger of relying purely on the signifier's form without understanding the agreed-upon signified concept. So, as you wrap up your prep for TAME 46 and head into your exams, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If Saussure was right, and the link between signifier and signified is literally just a tacit social agreement,
How much do these strict semantic rules, our synonyms, our antonyms, our categories, dictate the very way we perceive the world around us? Keep questioning those boundaries, and good luck with your studies.